This is a very good report. It's excellent report, and it contributes to a consensus, I think, that is now emerging about the importance of economic transformation in the development agenda in African countries. We've already seen it in Asian countries, Asian LDCs like Nepal and Bangladesh have talked about economic transformation. We're now seeing it much more being embedded in African countries, and there are now a number of reports that have come out that all tell this story that yes, African growth has been impressive, but unless African economies transform themselves structurally, and unless they move into higher productivity activities, unless they create high quality jobs, this growth can't be translated into poverty reduction, and this growth can't be sustained in the longer term. So you can have a one-off shift in the level of income, but if you don't transform your economies, you will never be able to sustain this growth. This consensus is now building up. We also see it in the post-2015 agenda, where in the past we were thinking about particularly about social goals here and now, but there is now an importance about thinking about environmental goals, but also economic goals. And the Open Working Group is now taking this message on board, and it's also in the forward of your report that by Ellen, that there is this important contribution to the development agenda. So it's a very different agenda. Economic transformation, the way you've defined it, so growth with depth, I think it's very appealing, and that's very nice. You can define it in different ways, but I think what we all agree on is that this is a different agenda. It's a long-term agenda, and in the past we were thinking about, so you've got a number of pathways, so natural resources, they were a curse. Now they need to become a boon. We were thinking about, you're thinking about raw materials, so Africa is exporting raw materials. Now you need to add value to it. You need to tap into global value chains. And manufacturing hasn't been increasing that much. The share has declined. We now need to see an increase in manufacturing. These are all long-term agendas, and that means doing different things differently. In country, development partners, business operators all need to be thinking differently. I've got three comments on it. One that I really like, what I really like about the report, something that needs maybe more nuances, and I feel there's something lacking as well. In terms of what I really like about, and I think we all agree on that, is this chapter 2, which is about state-business relations, and we've discussed this before also when I was at your premises, and I really like this as an issue. It's also something that the different ESG growth research program is doing work on state-business relations, and we've got some very interesting examples there throughout the report, and you've got, for instance, Mauritius as an interesting example. I was there just a week and a half ago to talk about structural transformation and the role of finance. And we had in a room about 10, 20 people who were actually responsible for the transformation over the 80s and 90s and the 2000s. So you had the former Minister of Finance, you had the head of the JEC, the Joint Economic Council, who's doing this public-private partnership, and a number of other players from the sugar sector and so on. And they said the single most important thing was for their country was to have a consensus about where the economy needs to be going. And so it was a sugar economy, and they had a consensus of going up the value-added ladder, going into garments, going into tourism, and now going into services sectors. And they had a consensus around this, and they knew that there were some losers and winners, and they were putting in place also compensation schemes for the losers, and aid actually helped with it. Aid was just 1% of GDP in Mauritius, but it actually helped to compensate the losers, and it's looking at aid in a different way here. It worked because there was good public-private interaction. The public sector actually led the private sector in that particular case. but there was a good understanding, and that helped. But of course, what if you're not like Mauritius? Can you then have the same put the same system in place? That I suppose is still a major question. How do you put this good public-private partnership or public-private dialogue, good state-business relations into place? Is still a major question. I think your report is beginning to contribute to that in chapter 2. So I think that's something that I really like. Then I think some of the nuances that may need to think about. When you think about economic transformation, of course, you can look at it at country level, from sector to another sector. You can look at it within the sector and even within firms. So productivity changes, there are huge productivity differences within firms, within a sector, and across sectors. And I think that we need to be brought out a bit more. If you look at the case of Botswana, for instance, I think they have an interesting example in a box in the report, which is about the Botswana Accountancy College, which from scratch, so there were in 1996 only 3 or 4 registered accountants, Botswana registered accountants. They were able to in a public-private partnership with the Diamond De Beers, they were able to put in place this Botswana Accountancy College, and they were able to educate within a decade 400 accountants, and that was sort of transformational in a sense. It helped, but it helped that particular sector. But just 3-4 minutes drive away from that was the International Financial Center, and they were able to lure a number of banks, Barclays banks, to the center. And the headquarters Africa was located in Gaborone in Botswana, but it moved out again. And why was that the case? Because there was no support structure for it. The back office services, they had to be outsourced. They had to actually go to Nairobi and so on. That seems to me that in the case of the Botswana Accountancy College, there was a good public-private partnership there that worked, but in other sectors it didn't work. So there wasn't. So there needs to also be nuances that it may be behind the index at country level. There are good stories and there are bad stories as well, and I think we need to unpack that. So why is that the case actually? And then final point on something that I'd like to see more on is the role of the financial sector. It's of course there are vertical issues, but there are horizontal enablers, and we talked. So there's infrastructure, there is skills. We talked about skills, very good on skills, but the role of the financial sector, I think, is also very very important. And we can take the example of Ghana, because of course there are many from Ghana here. We had a debate from the different ESG growth research program with the governor of the central bank in Ghana at the end of last year. And there we all said, well, basically, the finance sector is crucial. It's very important. It can support structural transformation, economic transformation. It is important to allocate resources. And what is not happening at the moment is allocating resources into SMEs or into long-term infrastructure projects. That needs to change. But what was also said was that it's hugely the finance sector is hugely inefficient. And what was measured, for instance, by the interest rate spread, and in Ghana it's like one of the highest in Africa. So interest rate spread was like 15%. So you already have the central bank rate is already high because of various reasons, and then you add to that the interest rate spread, which is a measure of inefficiency. There are other things in it as well, and it was huge. And there was no incentive to innovate amongst the banks. There are about 20 banks. They don't innovate. They don't become more productive. What can change there? What can we do there? And that's really important. If they can become more efficient and more competitive, then the interest rate spread can come down, and that can help to make investment costs cheaper, and it can help to sort of foster the transformation in a more helpful way. So I think that the financial sector also needs to shake up. In many African countries, it is just a cozy relationship very often, which tends to be inefficient. Although there are of course good examples in several countries as well. So concluding, I think it's an excellent report. It really contributes to consensus, I feel, in terms of the importance of economic transformation. And chapter 2 I love, is really good. I'm looking forward to seeing more reports.
Thank you so much, Dirk. So what I want to do now is throw it open. So, I mean, really to ask anybody on the panel any specific questions, and in particular Yara and KY. And I think we'll take them in maybe clusters of 3 questions, if you could say who you are when you ask the question, even though I know exactly who you are.